bringing the Geula and sort of taking upon ourselves that mission, it's a Rebbe'she Zach. It's Rebbe'she Avodah. There was always Rebbe'she in Yonim, and there was the Chassid. And a big part of the Rebbe's shlichus, if you may, the Rebbe's job was providing the Chassid with what he needs, that the Chassid should do the Chassid's work. And obviously, the Chassid would come to the Rebbe and see the Rebbe doing his Avodah, but that was the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol, it was the Avodah of the Nasi. It was like you came there for Tishrei, you saw the Rebbe do great, amazing things. It's all Rebbes, and all Gedei Yisrael. But then you came back home, and what does a Chassid do in his Avodah? But then on Yud Shvat, the Rebbe came and said, the mission of this Dor is a Rebbe'she shlichus.
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2024. My name is Bentzi Avtzon, and I will be your host. Let's begin. Alrighty, I'm here with my cousin, Rabbi Shmuly Avtzon, who, amongst other things, today runs Sichos In English, an organization that his father founded, or father was involved in the beginning of many, many years ago. His father being my uncle, Rabbi Yonah Avtzon, Olav Shalom, and also a Mashpia in 770. I'm not sure if there's other pursuits and other positions.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. But amongst others, those are some of the things that keep him busy, which is why I appreciate you taking the time today for the podcast. I thought an interesting way to frame this podcast would be, obviously we're cousins, we share last name, which is, for whatever reason, a very unique last name. There are many Avtzons, but they're all from the same exact family. There's only one grandfather Avtzon, one man Avtzon, and everybody who is named Avtzon is descended from him and his wife. Right. No, but a lot of times there are last names that, there are others with that.
Right, when someone comes over and says, "Are you related to that Avtzon?" It's first cousin, or at most first one's removed. You never find further. Yeah.
You've heard of another Avtzon in your life? So if someone's an Avtzon, then it's related.
There's some legend that Uncle Laser found someone in Ukraine that was part of a mafia or something. So we have roots.
That makes us feel cool. That makes us feel cool. But practically speaking, it's a very unique name. So we're obviously cousins, but in many ways we're also the same age, more or less. Within a couple months, I think you're a few months older than me. But for whatever reasons, we grew up in very, very different places. I don't even think we ever went to Yeshiva together. I don't think our paths ever crossed. Like in Altair, I think you were in Brno and Frankfurt. I don't think you ever made it to this side of the ocean.
Wasn't it Yisrael then? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you ever made it to this side of the ocean. So even in that melting pot, we still didn't meet.
770 you made it?
I was in 770, but I don't want to get into politics, but I'm not sure you can call that. No, for me personally, without getting into generalizing what 770, for me personally, 770 was very, very sharply the end of my Yeshiva years. Like the beginning of 770 marked the end of my Yeshiva years. I can't put all of that on 770. I can put part of it, but regardless, that's my story. But so in my years of Yeshiva, I don't think our paths ever crossed. And I grew up in a family on shlichus in Hong Kong, and you grew up here in Crown Heights. So I've said enough of your story. I think you can take it from here. But I think that it would be a very interesting kind of exploration of two Lubavitcher boys born more or less in the same time, to two men who were brothers. It'd be interesting to kind of see the similarities, the differences.
Right, I think part of it as well is saying Crown Heights versus shlichus today is very different than it was in the 80s and 90s. the dichotomy was a lot stronger.
Yeah.
And like today, Bichlal, it's one global village. But then it meant a lot on many accounts.
Yeah, it was like, the global village. I think the global village thing only covers up on the differences. But I agree that a lot of the differences that were there are no longer there or are much less defined. Not so much because there's internet and we can Zoom each other. Yeah, that's nice, but that doesn't really change facts on the ground. It's more that I think that, shlichus is in some ways less shlichus and karnheitz is less karnheitz.
Right, that's what I meant.
Yeah. No, because the global village is usually a reference to the internet.
Right.
Or like
It's also
technology.
Or when we talk about chutza, so the chutza and pnima today.
Right.
Like, where does one finish? Where does one end? Where does one start?
Right. Yeah, and there was also, we were both born in times when the Rebbe was alive, so that also made a very big difference of, were you around the Rebbe or were you not? Were you in that atmosphere? Were you not in that atmosphere? We're the same age.
And then there was the post Chav Zayin Adar pre Gimel Tammuz. There was right after Gimel Tammuz. There was there was a lot happening.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if we'll get to that part of it. And I don't mind, but we'll see. A lot to cover there. No, but my guess is you remember the Rebbe to some extent.
Sure.
Okay, so I don't.
Right.
So, for example, right there is an obvious kind of difference. But why don't you talk a little bit about what Karnheitz was like, or what you remember growing up? What was that like?
Right. So I was born in Tavshim Mem Zayin. It's in 1987. So that's about in Chav Zayin Adar. I was 4.5. So I have very few memories from pre-Chav Zayin Adar. Though what I know is, and this is what I heard from my father and others, but my father, the number one priority is that the kid should be by the Rebbe. Right, where we talk about living in Crown Heights and being by the Rebbe, but it wasn't a given, right? There was also many people that took it for granted. I was like, you're here, you came whenever you came. But my father, every opportunity possible, we came. So I'm not sure if this started Tafshin Nun, Tafshin Nun Aleph, if I was 2, 3, but every Shabbos in those years was a Farbringen. From after Tafshin Mem Ches, after Shvat, the Rebbe would Farbring every Shabbos. My father had a place basically right in front of the Rebbe, across the open aisle, and there would be a table like this in front of him. And the way I understand it is I was sitting there on the table every week. So we would come, we would have nash prepared from before Shabbos, and I was there. My older brother Levi was there.
This is pre-Erev days. Karnheit's pre-Erev. We're not talking about that.
What are we talking about? What are we? What are we not? Are the parameters there?
That's the Stam I interrupted you. No.
And so obviously, so Shabbos was by the Rebbe. Dollars. So we didn't go every single dollars, obviously, but before Yom Ledes, right? You see the picture over here. That's me before my fourth birthday.
Well, certainly not your third. Your hair's already cut.
Right, so. Right. No, that doesn't mean much. You'll see before my third, I pretty much had the same amount of hair. Yeah, it didn't do well. Besides for the first 3 people that cut my hair, everyone else just came to eat some.
It's an Avtzon thing. My brothers are the same way.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe, I don't know. Not me, but my brothers.
So we would go very often, Lefi Erech, and then came Chav Zayin Adar. So probably, I don't know if I would say my most vivid memory, but my earliest strong memory is Chav Zayin Adar happening. Right? And I think, and we'll talk about it, I believe, and this is probably, again, I would assume you as well, but living out of Crown Heights maybe was different, but definitely for me and my friends living here, and my age, a bit older, a bit younger, these years, and especially Chav Zayin Adar, Gimel Tammuz, and everything in between, and before and after that period, were extremely formative in our childhood and who we are and whatever not and where we are today. But that's a whole topic of its own. So Chav Zayin Adar happened, and just understand how clueless I was, but how much of a roishim this made was that we heard that the Rebbe fell.
Right.
I can't say if this was for weeks or months, but till today I have this memory in my head. For a while, I understood that the Rebbe was walking down the stairs in 770 from his bima and fell down the stairs.
Right.
Because all I knew from the Rebbe is the Rebbe coming into Shacharis, leaving the Rebbe's bima, where the Rebbe verbrings, where the Rebbe davens. The Rebbe fell as a child, right? Where the Rebbe fall down the stairs.
But that's also what the word fall means. The word fall means falls down, usually from standing.
Right.
Or stairs, especially at
Then it was like a while later that the Rebbe fell at the oil.
Right.
So that was a big deal. Then we were probably in, I don't know if I was in Moritz Poro's class, Moritz Poro Harlig, in kindergarten, nursery. Then this went on for the next couple of years. Between Chazan Adar and Gimel Tammuz, especially Tafshin on Gimel, Tafshin on Daled, when the Rebbe would come out to the balcony, and that was life. Life was, at any moment, the siren will go on, and we run to 770.
So the school would clear out?
To get the exact details, you have to ask the teachers and principals and maybe older Bachrim at the time. The way I remember it, I can't remember if we would leave school, but definitely from the moment I was home, if it was 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., whenever it was, and we were already in pajamas, the Rebbe came out. Before the Rebbe came out, the siren would go on. We'd be running up Kingston Avenue, find some place, and sometimes the Rebbe came out for a minute, for a second, for a few minutes. There was one that was Yotis Kislev, I believe, when we came there, and then I think my parents weren't even here, so we went with the babysitter. We just came, for a few minutes. We'll go back home. 6 hours later, we're coming home because the Rebbe was out for over 5 hours. Mm-hmm. But there's no concept of time, and because it was all whenever the Rebbe decides to come out for Mincha or Ma'ariv, there was no official Zmanim, so you were always on alert, and that was it. And you're not going to miss it because every glimpse of the Rebbe at the moment was everything. Then was Cheshvan, I believe, Nun Daled, when the Rebbe stopped coming out, followed by Chav Zayin Adar, the second stroke. And then we would start going. Then there was in Beth Israel. Then we started going. I definitely remember a few rallies there, going there, walking there. Achron Shel Pesach on Talucha. They did like a Talucha the second day, the last day of Yom Tov. So you walk one way, and constantly saying Tillim. Then King Gimel Tammuz. And Gimel Tammuz was just this. I'm sure there's many other people and probably older people that can give a richer, if you may, if we're looking for a tier, right?
If they agree to talk about it,
right? But it was, I don't know if it was a slap in the face. It was a complete shock. And it's always there. It's always there, one way or another. It's like it's.
What do you mean? It's always there?
By me, as almost 30 years later,
right?
It's
the shock is there.
The shock, yeah, that shock element. And that, right, so at the moment it was total confusion, and then narratives started being created, as happens in every such situation. I would, at least in my experience, Crown Heights of the next decade, I guess, until I went out of town for Yeshiva, was all one big aftershock of Gimel Tammuz in many different ways. I don't think it's the point here to get into the nitty gritty, but anyone that's been around knows what I'm saying.
No, that's for the mikveh. That's for the mikveh episode. But
yeah, but in a positive sense, everything was very Rebbe oriented, and it was like people were like fighting to keep the shchona, the Rebbe shchona, and any negativity or politics was sort of based around that, which was, I guess, somewhat positive. Also, there was a negative element there where the kids growing up were like, all of this is just very toxic.
Right.
But growing up, I started off in Lubavitch Yeshiva, then moved to Torah. When we started making Olaterniks, that was the age of the Olaterniks. Then finished Yeshiva, in Cheder, went to Eretz Yisrael for whatever reason, went to Eretz Yisrael for 5 years. Yeshiva Ktani, Yeshiva Gdela, went to Brunwa and Shlichus, that was in 770. Got married.
You were in a. Oh, you went to Brno as a shliach from Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah. I skipped the Shir Daled system.
Okay. I thought you were in Brno as a bacher, and I guess not.
Yeah, if you're expecting a rundown on Brunwa Chinuch.
No. That wasn't. I wasn't anticipating that. Just shows.
I was in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah.
Just shows how old I am, or because I used to know where you went to Yeshiva. I used to know where. Yeah. Yeah. Look, it's So just to compare and contrast a little bit, I have no recollection whatsoever of Zayin Adar. Zero. I remember very vaguely as a kid knowing that the Rebbe wasn't well. It's not even at a level of euphemisms, fell, didn't fall. It was so distant to me. There was a time in my life that I thought I remembered being at one of those post-stroke rallies in 770 and seeing the Rebbe, like actually seeing the Rebbe on the balcony. That memory has since faded many years ago. I'm not even sure if I ever had it or if I remembered it through a video. You know, you can, or you were told you were there, so now it was never a vivid memory. Even though when we would come to New York usually and to America for the summer, my parents would bring me for dollars. So the same picture that you have on your wall, there's a picture of me out there, somewhere, probably, with me at dollars also. I don't know if I was there ever at that age. It could be I was younger.
And travel then wasn't what it is today.
No, but we used to come every summer because
because
my parents were homesick. Like they were all the way in Hong Kong, so once a year they would come for the summer.
Then you would learn in Australia, right?
That was years later. That was after Gimel Tammuz. Yeah. But so vis-a-vis Gimel Tammuz, the only memory I have is Gimel Tammuz being told one day for me Plutzlung, but it wasn't like. It was like, the Rebbe passed away. I didn't even know who the Rebbe, what does that mean? Like, it wasn't like I've been engaged and engrossed in this world.
But you were on shlichus and doing the Rebbe's work, so there was that kind of.
Yeah, but not in that. I mean, I was a kid.
I mean, you didn't just hear of some Zaidi that you didn't know.
It was not sad. Right? It was not. You have to remember, it was not part of my life. And as a kid, most kids are not so much, at least non-geniuses like me are not so much into abstract ideas as kids. They are like, what's in front of me? So, it wasn't part of my weekly routine, monthly routine, daily routine. It wasn't part of my life. I was in Hong Kong, playing sports and going to the school with kids that weren't religious. So, you know what I mean? So one day my parents tell me that Rebbe passed away. Just also to give you a picture, like in Hong Kong was already Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. We're 12 hours ahead. My father sat Shiva for a day. So whoever was Madrichim told him to sit for a day, and I remember jumping on the couches. Like it wasn't a thing for me. I'm not pointing that out to try to figure out what that means for me. I think fakert. I think it's interesting for me to understand how it was for people who were more inside of it. Because you spoke about the the shock and how it remains. I mean, it's interesting to open that up a little bit. Like there's why was there such a shock? I mean, sadness I understand, loss I understand, but a shock, like what? It's easy to say that people were making stuff up, but the Rebbe, first of all, the Rebbe wasn't a young man to begin with. Then the Rebbe wasn't well for 2 years. What did you as a child expect to happen, or were you not thinking about it?
Look, I was 5, 6, and 7 years old, right?
Right.
So I'm not here to. But my understanding was that this shock was by older people as well. Look, there was a lot of factors involved, but I would say at the core, I think there was pretty much a belief or a narrative or a pshittis, whichever way you'll define it, that it can't happen. It was that's just the way it was. It was impossible.
Right.
You could hear the drushes from the time and the Farbrengens of that time was maybe here and there were other voices, but that was pretty much the understanding. And at least the way we saw it, it was miyusid on the Sichos. It was miyusid on the chinuch the Rebbe gave us. Much of it wasn't even so super sophisticated. There was Chabad, 7 doiros, Dor Hashvii.
Right.
There's no next doir. The Rebbe's finishing Basi Lagani, Bimamshich the Shechina Lamata, together with us and taking us out of goals. As I'm saying, on a basic level, it wasn't. Yeah, you had, Rabbi Yoel would come and have big pulpulim about it. But I think for the Hamoyin Am, it was just, this is impossible. There is no alternative.
So if you could
that's from a narrative place. But then also, remember, there was the connection, the emotional connection to the Rebbe.
But that describes sadness and pain. That explains sadness and pain, right? Like, if someone, forget about Lubavitch, if someone loses their parent who's 95 years old and lived a full and beautiful life,
right,
and they tell you that they're in pain, you don't say, "Oh well, it was supposed."
Right, I understand.
You saw it coming anyway.
But I'm Sachakol sharing the experience of a young child.
I understand.
So for a young child, the Rebbe is living forever, and that was it. It's not. It wasn't a super sophisticated. But again, your
feelings were corroborated by the
here
adults.
Probably right, and here probably is where, as you mentioned earlier, this is where I'm already going to my memories and bring it together with narratives I heard later in life, and the Sichos and the arguments in Yeshiva, and which was a big part of life in the 90s and 2000s, etc.
Yeah.
So looking back, maybe. But it was definitely there. There was definitely that thing that it was mufrich. It was clear to us that what was going on was Chevli Mashiach, and this is it. And it just, the Lashon then was with one swing of the hand, the Rebbe will take us out of goals. Right? That was the zach.
Homesick for Lubavitch is brought to you by Yuvla Media, which is my video production company. At Yuvla Media, we believe in the same principles as this podcast. Namely, that in our communities there are just so many stories worth sharing and worth telling, and that in the end, a good story is always so much more. Over the past few years, we have helped dozens of nonprofits, companies, and families share their very precious stories with the community. If you're looking to share your story, please don't hesitate to reach out to us for a free consultation at hello@yuvlamedia.com. Again, that's hello@yuvlamedia.com. A link can be found below as well. For now, let's get back to the podcast. But now that you're older, so I mean, I could go in a direction where, like, what do you think about the people that said this? What do you think about the people that said that? I don't know. I mean, I don't find that super interesting,
Right.
to be honest. At least not with people our age, because it wasn't really something that we were involved in. We were kids. But what do you think now that you are older and you're looking back at it through the lens of accumulated experience and understanding? How do you unpack it looking back? Is it because you said an interesting line before that it was a shock then and it's remained with me until today. At some point.
Right, so I guess if I'm thinking about what it remains today, I don't know if it's the shock or it's the pain, but there's a certain sort of thrown off.
Right.
That's sort of like.
Right. That's exactly how I understood.
Right.
That's disoriented is a very powerful word, and that's exactly what I'm getting at. How do you, at some point as you get older, you choose whether or not to hold on to how something was understood when you were younger, or to rethink it, revisit it, reframe it, understand it differently based on what you know now, right? So, looking back, looking back now, how do you understand that moment, or how do you look at that moment? Is it still the same kind of disorienting moment where everything gets thrown off and we are still in a kind of pattern of confusion, or has it begun to make more sense?
Look, it's many years later, and it's not just time, it's also we're adults, right? We're adults, we have families, we have kids, we're in a very different position and situation. it's hard to define. Obviously, a lot has changed, right? There was when we were kids, and then bachrim, and then newly married, and then doing different things, and being in a few positions, and seeing the world for whatever that means. Yeah, of course, a lot changed, and how we understand what the Rebbe wants from us, and where we are today, and with Mela, how Gimel Tammuz fits into that. I would still say that, I guess it's at times, the Bachrim already know that late night Verbringens, sometimes very late in the Verbringen, and where it's like all guard is off, and if I want to or not, I might go to that space. That's certain, like that broken space, kind of. Mm-hmm. But as a whole, our hearts in one place, our minds are come up with all kinds of ideas. But I think also, definitely is a more wholesome understanding of life, of our mission, of Lubavitch today. Right, this is already into your space.
so
I don't know what's mine, what's yours.
No, it's very interesting. Like, why do you go to that space with Bachrim?
As I'm saying, it's something that I just do. Thanks.
It's not cold, but
yeah, that's fine. No, that's what I'm saying. It's not something that I want.
I'm saying you end up there.
So that's a good point that's a good point that you brought up. Like back in the day, as I went about a year after marriage, I started teaching in yeshivas, and then it was like part of my, I would call it then chinuch, not like as a whole, mechanic, but like sort of like I want to share that.
Part of your job, right?
I want to share that. I want to, I feel for the good, for the bad. It's something that I've experienced, something that I was by, and sort of on that cliff, right somewhere. The Gimel Tammuz childhood.
Right.
We do remember before, but
right.
a big part of experience was experiencing that. Then I today, or not, even a few years ago, it's for me that's already that's not what it is. It's not what it is. I don't think that's the message. I don't think that's the point. Other than, it's similar to the guys from Russia. They just want to tell you how things were then. It's like, all of us want to.
Right.
There's a positive point where we want to share the past and share a purity and an emes from that we want to hold on to. We don't want to lose.
Right.
But there's also a big part of it is I was there. We all want to. We always want to be on top, right? And be at a place that you weren't, and have an experience that you didn't have, and then share it as well, right? But yeah, today I don't think that's that. I don't consciously do it. I just think it's just part of me, so it comes out one way or another.
What's changed? Is it just a passage of time that it's like less? It just kind of fades away, or it's a shift in understanding of what's important?
I would love to say that it's the second. I mean, that it's only the second.
Mm-hmm.
And that time hasn't affected me at all. But I think we're all human, so probably it did. But yeah, but primarily it's looking at what you'd call today's bacher. Looking at Lubavitch today. I'm trying to figure out what the kavan is, what God wants from us, what the Rebbe's mission and by extension our mission is today. And seeing things from a different view, seeing things differently. It's not, you can't compare how you see things when you're 5, when you're 15, when you're 20, when you're 30.
Right. Right.
And then there's just facts on the ground. When you're sitting in front of a group of 50, 100 bachrim,
right,
and the oldest guy there was born Tafshin Samach Aleph, right, and this is the oldest bachrim. They're in Shidduchim now. They're getting married, right? In some 70s. In the 70s, the bachrim at the end of the systems. Your oldest boys. You're forced to confront it, or maybe not everyone's. I feel that I'm forced to confront it.
Yeah, anybody that has enough humility to know that time isn't something you have a control over, should be forced to think about that, and is forced to think about that. It's interesting because you speak about the Bachrim and how kind of their time frame becomes in many ways the dominant time frame, which is understandable, right? They are the people that you're educating. They are the student body. But it kind of it highlights to me an interesting dynamic where I think one of the things that Gimel Tammuz did was it fractured people according to their ages, meaning, people were always different based on their ages. When you had, excuse me, at the Rebbe's Farbrengen, a 6-year-old, a 40-year-old, and a 20-year-old sitting at the Farbrengen, right, and possibly the 6-year-old was in Russia, and this 40-year-old maybe was born on the way out of Russia, and so on.
Right.
They were all very different, but their Lubavitch experience kind of melted together into one. I was by the Rebbe's Farbrengen Tavshin Lamed because it's all about what the Rebbe said at the Farbrengen. So that's the moment that everyone shares, and everyone believes that there's a unified experience. And like Lubavitch of Tavshin Lamed, you don't hear Lubavitch of Tavshin Lamed. Well, there's Lubavitch of Tavshin Lamed that the Bachrim understood, and there's a Lubavitch of Tavshin Lamed that the Yuvla understood, and there's a Lubavitch of Tavshin Lamed that the Elter Chassidim understood.
So obviously there was.
Right, but that's not how people talk about it. That's what I'm saying.
There's the Lameds.
Of course there
There's
was.
the men's,
Of course there was.
Right.
Right. At the Lameds, you already had Elter Chassidim looking at these other guys like, what's wrong with, at the younger guys, what's wrong with you? What you're a bunch of hooligans with your mitzvah tanks,
right.
And then there are waves of mitzvah tanks, so now they have to shut up. Whatever. Right? There were, of course, many experiences, but in our concept of it, it's like, no, there was a Lameds because it's all about what the Rebbe said in the Lameds or what happened in the Rebbe's Chutz in the Lameds. But after Gimel Tammuz, that's over. That part is over. That's gone, right? And so now you end up having a situation where, like, what we're talking about now, and now there's the Bachrim, and then there's you, and then there's the people who are older than you who look at Gimel Tammuz
right.
in a
And
different way.
I think part of what was going on here and around Lubavitch, probably in general, in the nuns in the 90s, many people were trying to hold on to that pre-Gimel Tammuz in many areas, but we'll use the language you've been using, that uniformity. And like I would say what was going on here for like 10 years, there was literally a fight for the soul of the shchuna.
Right.
Where it's like, is it going to be this way? Is it going to be that way? As if we're going to be able to canonize the shchuna.
Freeze it.
Right? Yeah. And time will be frozen. So I think that was, part of it was very positive. It was like, because post-Gimel Tammuz reality was completely out of the question, so how do you deal with the post-Gimel Tammuz reality? Deny it in all kinds of ways. Right? And denying it doesn't have to come in all crazy ways. Part of it is just, let's keep the status quo, don't make any changes, but then which status quo and which changes not to make. So that's where the fight happened. And then and at some stage, it was like, guys, this isn't it. And Gimel Tammuz is part of the plan. And part of the plan means part of the way the Eibusha created the world. And like you said, time and Zman U'Makim are also a bria of the Eibush there, for a reason. And then so that's when you start realizing, okay, so what does this actually mean? And then you realize that there are a few truths here, and one of them is the one that you just mentioned, that in a time like this, the individual, in the Lashon of the Sichos and the Chassidus Bechlal, the Tachtin, right, the Yachid gains a certain, I don't call it a prominence, but it is put out there, and it's like, now where are you?
Right.
Now that's obviously very, very complicated because it's something that really wasn't there. Again, I'm sure out of Crown Heights was a bit different, but here definitely it was the Rebbe Shchuna.
Right.
And everything was just part of that klal, was part of that. And now all of a sudden, we need people here to make decisions, and we need Rabbanim to make decisions, and we need Aguch and Merkez and all the moistus.
Nobody in Crown Heights said they needed Aguch.
I said we'll talk about shlichim also.
Okay, I'm just saying.
The point is positions of leadership, of people actually making decisions.
Yeah.
So in the first stage, I don't think anyone wanted to make decisions, and anyone wanted anyone else to make decisions.
I mean, this was going on before Gimel Tammuz already. You know, the founding, not the founding of Aguch, but the famous meeting of Aguch where the Rebbe called in.
G'dolim nasu Tyoshin.
Yeah, he called them in and told them that they have to basically assume a position of leadership. And Rabbi Chalikov told them, and I've heard this from a number of the members, he told them this never happened. Right? The Sikh had to go out because Rebbe insisted.
I'm saying what just happened didn't happen.
Yeah. Like we're not
Right, and then there was the
we're not
Sicha
playing ball.
Beis Adar Memches that the Rebbe, I understand the Rebbe asked to be Magir a few times and was never given into the Rebbe.
Right.
Imagine the Rebbe is asking to edit the Sicha because it's so fundamental. Megit this in Sharain, because by not giving it in, it's as if it wasn't said.
Yeah. Look, this is very important stuff. And not to get into the politics, I can't anyway because there are people that are related to me, you know, in this and.
Everyone's related to everybody.
No, but I mean, like it's
Right,
you know, let someone else. I can't be objective about it. There's a simple fact, but that there is a point where you said before that as time passes, people have realized or people have decided. I don't think that's nobody made a decision. Sadly, or not sadly, maybe understandably, the fact is that there has never really been a public reckoning about what was correct, what wasn't correct, what even if it was understandable and even perhaps correct at the time, it's no longer correct. There has not been that kind of reckoning, certainly not publicly, and I don't mean publicly an apology.
People up in the town square.
An apology in the New York Times or on the equivalent of that in Lubavitch. My point is simply, the conversation has never happened in any real way. It's kind of, to me, what's happened is that younger people have grown up and younger people have realized, whether consciously or subconsciously, that living life going down a dead end is not a good idea, right? The mashal I have in my head is that, and I've thought about this for a while, this mashal, where, you have a ship, that has a hole in it. It's an irreparable hole. You can't fix it, but it's a very small hole. So we know that this ship is going to be in the ocean the ship can't reach land. We know that it's not going to sink right now, but we know it's going to sink with Vados in 60 years. Okay, just for the people getting nervous, I'm not saying that ship is Lubavitch. I'm saying there is a ship that's in the ocean that has a hole in it. That means that if it doesn't reach land, it's going to sink in 60 years. Now, on that ship, you have people that are older, and you have people that are in their 80s, and you have people in their 60s, and people in their 40s, people in their 20s, and so on. You have the whole gamut of people on that ship. How do the people on the ship look at this prospect of the ship sinking in 60 years? I think it's simple to say that the people who are older, the ship sinking in 60 years is an abstraction, meaning they care about it only because they care about their loved ones. Which is, okay, abstraction doesn't mean fake, but it's not as immediate. Their life has been lived. They've lived their life. By the time this problem is real, they're gone. They know that, right? The younger people, wait a second, we're going to sink on this ship. We're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to wait like that. That's not a plan, right? And so I think, Vanimshal Yuvan, however you want to understand it, and however much you want to make out of it, however little you want to make of it, or if you want to make anything out of it, if you don't like it, that's also fine.
It's not a mashal from Tyrus, doesn't have to be meduyik in alle pratim.
Yeah. That's a disclaimer on this podcast. Right. Anything in general. But my point is that I don't think it just happened. I think as younger people.
Look, so I'll tell you, I have no tinus.
I didn't say this time.
I'm saying for myself, meaning you would speak to me 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Yeah, there were times I would sort of look at the older generation and be like, what were you thinking?
Right.
In so many areas, right? And we don't even have to say them. It's like
right.
I think even today's bacher doesn't even know how dysfunctional so many things were then, because we've been over that hump to a certain degree, meaning you have a whole new generation of leadership and changes that just happen either deliberately or by osmosis or just because life happens. But we would sort of look around as Bachrim, definitely an elder Bachrim and Jungelite, and be like, what's going on? Right. But I think, and probably you say the same, at this age you realize, like, was willst du?
Right.
These guys were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, never mind, 70s, even older.
Right.
And you were just hit like this with at the end of the day, zero preparation. You could say that the Rebbe prepared us, but the reality was that emotionally and mentally and ashkafic wise, we weren't there. And there was a lot of fear. So it was impossible. They were frozen. They were actually frozen. And this is where sometimes time is more than anything.
I agree with you. I don't think, at least from my standpoint, I don't see there's anything to be gained by turning around and pointing fingers. And it's not just because I want to be a bigger man, and no, it's just it's useless. Like, what's the point? First of all,
right.
Second of all, like you said, I think there is a sense of, like everybody, you're angry at your father until you get older and you are a father and say, okay, wait a second, the things that I was angry about, I'm not doing so well myself, or now I respect things that and so on. So as I get older, I agree. It was
also, I think, it was a few years ago during COVID, where the world was thrown into and no one had a clue what they were doing.
Right.
On all levels of leadership and professionals and the government, medical community, Rabbanim, everybody.
Right.
And then you realize, like, certain things happen in life and no one's prepared for them. It's like, was willst du von say?
Right.
And at the time, everyone was all resentful. And then as time goes on, it's like, it is what it is. You would have done any better.
I certainly don't. I certainly don't know that I would have done any better. I also don't believe that, and even if I completely disagree with some of the things that were done, it's hard for me to believe that the people of that generation didn't care about their children. Of course there are people that will come and argue about cults and stuff like that. That's not my understanding of it. It's not my experience of it. So, I sensed genuine love from towards the children, towards myself, but also around me. People cared about their kids. They would not be doing something that they thought was going to cause harm down the road. So I think the idea of coming in and getting upset, I mean, people are upset, they're upset, but that doesn't animate me.
Right.
So what's the point of talking about it besides having an excuse for a podcast? No, but seriously speaking, like, I think that when we understand what happened and both understand how we got there in the first place, right, or how they got there in the first place, and also understand that those things that led us there in the first place don't just disappear by themselves. Yes, time could smooth things over, but if you're trying to really move forward, you need to understand what, I don't know if the words went wrong, but what led us there to a problematic place, or to a place that, I think is a problematic place, and say, wait a second, are those Yesodis things that we want to hold on to or not? You see what I'm saying? Like, how did we end up in a place where, for example, we were talking earlier, where the Rebbe is telling people, I need you to understand that we need to have, like, you need to assume responsibility. You need to assume responsibility.
Simple English,
right? Yes. Look, the Rebbe took, after the Rebbetzin passed away, the Rebbe during Shiva wrote a tzavah, but he kept it private. So I don't know the Rebbe's, what he was thinking and how he saw things and what his what the process was, but clearly there was a difference between private and public. So I don't know how much the Rebbe wanted people to publicly think about these things.
Yeah, but even let's say the Sichos of Chavches
right,
Chavches, without even talking about Histalkus Sprach, right? It was just like, that's what can. I did mine, you do it. But the immediate response, there were all kinds of responses, but there was a big tzad shava of a lot of the responses was, here, Rebbe, take it back. Right? If it was that Shabbos, the chassid getting up and telling the Rebbe, we can't. You have to do it on Sunday. Mordechai and David coming by the Rebbe, and the lady coming by the Rebbe. The Rebbe telling his Alman Garari, Lenogavle Pogad, literally 5 seconds later. It was just so hard to handle. It was just a panicked response.
So what led us there in the first place? I think I know what I can say for myself. Subjectively, I can certainly say I think that's problematic. I don't know if it's objective in the sense that people may argue with me and say fakert, it shows on a certain kind of dedication. But I think ultimately, a Rebbe and a chassid is not just about your hergeshim and how much you love the Rebbe. That's not what the whole idea is about. That's not what the Rebbe came into a Rebbe doesn't come into the world so that you have someone to love and that you have someone that loves you. Like, we have to be honest that a Rebbe comes into the world to educate and inspire and bring people closer to the Eibishter. That's definitionally what a Rebbe is, right? Pick people up and make them bigger Yidden, closer to the Eibishter, and inspired to do that work. This is always how we've understood Chassidus. It's not just about your feelings. I'm not saying the feelings are wrong.
Right.
I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm saying it doesn't end that if I love the Rebbe, then so at some point, the fact that our feelings or other people, their feelings, to me, it wasn't relevant. Like, I was a kid, but the fact that the feelings got in the way of assuming the responsibility that the Rebbe was openly talking about, and that in hindsight we can see logically, obviously, the Rebbe said, look, the Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe wrote a tzava, right? Well, what does that tell you? The Rebbe saw, or the Rebbe, I know these things start getting very complicated for people. One day I'll say exactly what I think, but
how many seasons do you have to be through to?
No, I'm saying I can say what I say, what I think, but that doesn't mean that you agree with me. The Rebbe saw that he was getting older, or that he was already very old. He was already we also forget the Rebbe was Pashut in that time already in his late 80s. But the Rebbe saw that the day is getting near. Al pi teva, the day is coming near. The Rebbe's passed away, and it's time to make a plan for the day after. I don't know how else you explain the Rebbe bringing in lawyers and bringing in Eidim. Whether or not you agree who the Eidim were, who they should have been, that's irrelevant. That did take place. There's testimony to it. There's legal documents to it. And not even that. The Rebbe spoke about it in Sichos. The Rebbe spoke about it. And like you just said, Chavches, even in the more kind of euphemistic, not like legally, but Pasha, take responsibility, people pushed back at that. So it's clear that the Rebbe was trying to bring people to that point, and the feelings got in the way, is what you're saying, right? The feelings got in the way. So clearly there's a problem there. You don't think there's a problem there? Or maybe it's just
right. So a few points, right? So number one, as you just started saying, by us feelings don't get in the way, right? We're humans, right? Now you'll say, but when my feelings get in the way, it's about having an extra piece of sushi. And these people, or that time, feelings getting in the way was you might even call it dangerous, right? The consequences were greater. Fine. It's like when everyone gets frustrated with the Israeli government, why aren't they doing this? And why aren't they listening to the Rebbe? And it's like
because you listen to Rebbe on everything.
I heard from Ofer Maidovnik, Mashpia in Shvat. So he's Arik Sharon's nephew. So during the disengagement, not good, it was 20 years ago. So he went to him and he was speaking to him, and finally he confronted him. He says, Arik, you had a cash with the Rebbe. You knew the Rebbe. He loved the Rebbe. And he's like, how do you not listen to the Rebbe? And Arik looks at him and says, take it easy.
That's very true.
An idiot is nicht gewesen.
No.
So that's not right. So that's the first point. Feelings are feelings, and but we're emotional creatures. Right?
That's not my type.
That's number one. That's number one.
Right.
Number two, I would rephrase it a bit differently. There was an element of feelings, but I don't think it was only feelings. Because feelings, at the end of the day, you could come to people and say, "At the end of the day, be an adult.
Right.
Put your pants on, stand up, and get over it."
You also
It wasn't
get,
just feelings.
You don't get 20 years to deal with your feelings either.
Right. Though it depends. In some modalities, it's a lifelong.
Say there.
We'll get to that later. I think it wasn't just feelings, or it wasn't even primarily feelings. I think a lot of it was narrative.
Right.
And narrative, some of the narrative was true. By true, I mean some of it was sourced. It was Sidasi B'Hari Kodesh. It was, you could say it was the way we understood it, but we understood what the Rebbe was telling us. We understood what Chassidus was teaching us. And we lived that way for a very decent amount of time. And then, Chaf Bei Shvat, Chaf Ches Nisan, Gimel Tammuz, whichever date you'll take, but a shift did happen, right? And this will always be, was there a shift? Was there not a shift? There was a shift in emphasis, definitely in the way it was presented to us and the way we understood it. And that shift threw us off. And so here was sort of perhaps...
What was the shift in your mind? It was already Chaf Shvat. You're talking about the shift to Chazai Adar.
Chaf Shvat. I guess probably in the mid mems, maybe a bit earlier. I'll get to that in a minute. What the shift was, the way I see it. Now, of course, we can come back as revisionists, and we can come and say, we always, that's an almo devart, right? That was always the nekuda.
Right.
And in some eras, that's true. Meaning, some things when we're speaking about in Yonah that Rebbe spoke about in the later years. A lot of it is Zalbazach. It was like, things were maybe more clear and things were given different oisias. But the ideas were always there, right? The Rebbe didn't, it's a basic thing, in Yonim Mashiach, the Rebbe didn't wake up, Tavshin One Aleph, start speaking on Mashiach, right? That's ludicrous.
Right.
Not just that the Rebbe spoke about it earlier, it's Yiddishkeit.
Right.
But the main point that I would put it at was the emphasis on who's taking the lead. Right? When you say the Rebbe's job is connected to the Eibishter, of course. But how does that play out? And what does that practically mean? And here, there were changes throughout the Doiris. And primarily, and I'm sure you had people that discussed this, there was the way it was understood in previous Doiris and Dor Hashvii, and then there was Dor Hashvii. Right? And the Dor Hashvii narrative, which was pretty much accepted probably by most people. Again, you could say it came all from the Rebbe, you could say the Mashpia understood, you could say certain Mashpia, certain individuals, certain people in leadership. But either way, it's a mix of all of them that gave a certain Dor Hashvii understanding of the role of a Rebbe and Chassid, which was a bit different than previous days. So,
what do you mean?
To leap for a moment, if those sichos that we spoke about earlier, right, and that sprach of the later years of taking ownership, if it was said in Tafshin Zayin by the Friedrich Rebbe, the transition would be a lot easier, or maybe it wouldn't have to be a transition at all, because maybe that was always the message.
Right.
It's the post Mem Zayin Mem Ches Sichos coming after Tafshin Yud or Tafshin Mem Zayin.
Right.
That sort of threw us off our game. I think that's what it is. And that point would be that in Dor Hashvii, the Referish was an understanding that the Rebbe there is more of a focus on the Rebbe. Before I get into details, but I think just in those general terms. And the Rebbe has a shlichus, the Rebbe has a mission, and we're often Rebbe's vagon, right? We're going on the Rebbe would say that an Araman for the first class, right? You're not paying for your ticket anyway, so you go first class. The Rebbe has a first class ticket, and we're going on the Rebbe's wagon. And a big part of how we understood Iskashrus and Chassidus today was through that prism. And the Rebbe himself says in the Farbrengen of Purim Tavshim Mem Zayin, where the Rebbe asked that why Lachrein we're speaking about Mashiach a lot more than we used to, etc. And the Rebbe says that a shift happened, and the shift is that it used to be the job of the Nasi to bring the Geula. And we sort of did that through, the Rebbe used the Lashon of Iskasher, sort of, we're connected to him, but he's the one, he's the locomotive, right? And now it went from the Nasi to the Am, from the Nasi who are Koil to the Ein Melech B'lo Yam, to the Am, to the people themselves.
This is when Rebbe was explaining the Fitik was saying out to the Gula, out to the Tshuva, and why it didn't happen. Because it sounds like a similar explanation.
I think that's maybe speaking out of Fareg and Tavshim Mem Hey, but there's Oisius there as well. It's a fascinating Fareg. It's the last Purim Fareg. The Rebbe Fareg on Purim Day, because after Tavshim Mem Ches, the Rebbe stopped Fareg during the weekday Yom Tov Yom the Pagras. So it's Purim Fareg. The Rebbe then spoke about Sheva Mitzvahs, and the Rebbe spoke about the changes going on in the world. On the one hand, you see amazing things L'Toiv. On the other hand, you see amazing things, crazy things L'Mutav. People are doing unbelievably good things that we never imagined could happen. People also exhibiting unbelievable negative character traits. And the Rebbe explained that before Mashiach comes, then Nevuah and Daniel is Yisparu v'Yislabnu.
Right.
That it all comes out to the surface.
Black and white. Yeah.
It all comes out to the surface. The good comes out to the surface. This is Mem Zayin, right? We're looking back over the last almost 40 years, right? That you see that a lot. You see just everything coming out. I'm saying what's going on in the world the last year. You just see so much coming to the surface on so many accounts by Yidden, by Goyim, the world.
Right.
So yes. So one of the things that I was speaking about that. The point that I was trying to bring out is, when I finished the Sicha that way, with the starke Lashon, that now the main point I'm trying to say is that every single person, a Noshim has a Achrayis on themselves to bring the Gula. Right? Which in a way, it's like you look back like what's the Chiddush here?
Right.
Isn't that, did we come to this world to make a Dir B'Tachtoinim? Isn't that Tanya 101? Isn't that Yiddishkeit? Definitely the way Chassidus Chabad views it. It was always about bringing the Gula, making Dir B'Tachtoinim. And now the big message is that everyone has the achrayis to bring the Gula. So here, there's obviously many nuances, and every Mashpia and every guy will have his thing, and I'm sure there's many people that could express it way better than me. But you see the Sicha, the Rebbe is definitely discussing a shift in mindset. So, and a big part of that was, we definitely saw that the Rebbe's, when the Rebbe said Basi Lagani, the Rebbe said that the 6th Dor is now the 7th Dor is Ein Adavar Talui Elabanu Dor Hashvii, but the understanding was Banu means the Rebbe, and we sort of follow,
right?
And we follow. That was the Havana, right. And I'm sure you remember from Farbrengens and Yeshiva and things that you've learned. There was definitely that was the narrative, and again, but I can't say that it was self-made. We didn't make it up. There was definitely now. When you'll ask why that shift, and if the relationship of Rebbe and Chassidim for so many doiros was a certain way, how could that change? And without even getting to more complicated questions of like, where's the person and all that, even from like, what's the derech of Chabad? So in very, I would say, shitchiistic terms, the way I would put it is, let me take a break. You go.
No, keep on going.
You'll interrupt when you have to.
Of course, yeah. You're explaining how the
Yud Shvat, Tavshin Yud, especially Yud Aleph Shvat, Yud Aleph Shvat, Tavshin Yud Aleph, and the Rebbe started in the Siyas. The Rebbe took upon himself an unbelievable mission, right? Unprecedented. It's not just Bichlal, the job of every Yid is to make a Dir B'Tachtoinim. The mission of our Doyer is, and mind you, as we know, this is just a couple of years after the Holocaust. Right. What was the Yiddish world then? What was Lubavitch then? Who was the Rebbe speaking to upstairs in 770?
Right.
It's a mix of Holocaust survivors, American kids, or some Bachrim and without beards, a few Israeli Bachrim that just came.
The Farbrengen didn't make the first page cover, first page on the New York Times.
Or even Kfar Chabad.
Yeah.
So, and the Rebbe was like, okay, so you would think at that stage, our job is to rebuild Yiddishkeit after the Holocaust, and our job is to make a place where whole kinds of kirov. And the Rebbe did speak that language in interviews. There's beautiful interviews. I think there's an interview mamash a few months later with Gershon Kranzler that was published, where the Rebbe gives his vision of how to bring Yiddishkeit to the masses, and also in Bas Lagan, Rebbe speaks about Tikar V'Yikra V'Yakri. But the mission is much larger than that. It's I'm starting with 400 guys, with a few hundred mishpachas in Eretz Yisrael, and a few others that are still stuck in Paris waiting to get visas to go across because they just came with the trains a few years ago from Russia. And yet, we're taking over the world and we're bringing the Geula. It was a very daring idea, and it's something that's not for the regular Joe Schmo.
But let's finish the thought.
So the point I'm trying to bring out, if we need to, we'll get to it a bit deeper. And the point is, bringing the Geula and sort of taking upon ourselves that mission, it's a Rebbe Zach. It's a Rebbe Avodah. There was always Rebbe in Yonim, and there was the Chassid. And a big part of the Rebbe's shlichus, if you may, the Rebbe's job was providing the Chassid with what he needs, that the Chassid should do the Chassid's work. And obviously, the Chassid would come to the Rebbe and see the Rebbe doing his Avodah, but that was the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol, it was the Avodah of the Nasi. It was like you came there for Tishrei, you saw the Rebbe do great, amazing things. It's all Rebbes, at all Gedei Yisrael. But then you came back home, and what does a Chassid do in his Avodah? But then on Yod Shvat, the Rebbe came and said, the mission of this Dor is a Rebbe shlichus. It's massive stuff, way beyond how to not have machshavas zaras during davening and how to be me'oder a bit of avavira and how to. It's so much bigger than that. Yeah. This is not stuff for kids. It's not kid stuff. It's not even adult stuff. Yeah. This is Gedolei Yisrael Amitim. This is like one of the sichos that spoke about bringing the Geula, and we did all we can, and what can we do now? And so the Rebbe brings in the Adar. The Rebbe brings the story of Rabbi Yosef de Lorraina, which was basically a Gadol Yisrael that decided he's going all out to bring the Geula, start up with the Satan, and really graphic story. And the Rebbe is explaining there why what we're doing now is not like that. But the point is, the Gedolei Yisrael this was their arena.
Right.
You don't do that
in public.
All of us don't open 400 companies. We don't do that. We're just having mom and pop shops, trying to make a decent living.
Right.
And now the Rebbe says, no, it's the United States of America. We're going to go and conquer the world.
Right.
So the Havana was, and again, a big part of this, the way I understand it, did come from the Rebbe, and you could see it in multiple Sichos and Igris, is the way we're going to do it is, anhalten beim Klamke, go along with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is going to take you to crazy heights. And together with the Rebbe, we're going to do unbelievable things. And we did.
I agree with what you're saying to an extent. I mean, I certainly agree that Basili Gani changed the scope of the brief, let's say. And I always point out that, whenever I learn Basili Gani with someone, I always notice with them how in the Frierdiker Rebbe's Basili Gani, on which the Rebbe's Basili Gani is based for the next 40 years, the Frierdiker Rebbe has a Musar Haskell in the 5th Sif of Basili Gani. Like, the Frierdiker Rebbe, most of his Mamarim, certainly in America, always had like an Avaidadika kind of takeaway. Right. And the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted Bali Asik to do business. I think maybe that's later in the Mimer, to do business.
Even over there, yeah.
No, but to do B'emunah, because later on he speaks about honest business, but there, Kriyasim Latera, go down with the minion.
The big shtus dikdusha.
Right.
And is what?
To be a from Yid.
Right, that just like this mani achila, no matter what, even if you're not hungry, you have to eat now.
Right.
Transform that to kedusha, that no matter what, you have your kriyasim l'Torah. That's what it is. Right. That's the shtus to kedusha.
Right. And then the Rebbe bases a mimer on that, and it's like you're looking at your house from 40,000 feet up in the plain. You're like, I live in that little box over there. How could I even live there? Yeah, because when you're on the ground, it's much bigger.
Nachmer, the Rebbe has on the Basili Gani. So the Basili Gani Tafshin Yud, the Frierdiker wasn't saying Mamar, and then also came out for his Istalkos. It was Mamar from earlier years.
Yeah.
So the Frierdiker Rebbe said a Tafresh Pei Gimel. Then it wasn't called Basili Gani. Then there was 2 Mamarim, not 4 Mamarim. The first one was Boy Be'etzem Yem Hazeh, and the next one was B'Shalach Maimer. The Rebbe, on the Mafteach of the Mamarim of Tafresh Pei Gimel, the Rebbe wrote in, the Ksav Yad is out there, where the Rebbe heard from his father-in-law about this Maimer, which we know as Basili Gani, that their Maimer is a Balabatisha Maimer, because through this Maimer, Meverta Balabas of the Nefesh Bahamas. That's Basili Gani.
That's Basili
It's
Gani.
a Balabatisha Maimer.
Yeah.
It's an internal work. How to
so
get out of bed and actually come to your Kviyasit and L'Torah.
So there's no question that there's a massive shift that took place there. Although I would argue that in hindsight, or certainly once you learn the Rebbe's take on Basili Gani, it's impossible to see it as a small mimer. You realize how big it is. The Shtus Kedusha, Dir B'Tachtonim, Iker Shchina, later on, Bizbos HaYetzeres, Aaron Seif, Lamaila, Mala, Allen Kates, and so on. These ideas are massive ideas, and the Rebbe opens them up immensely. Basiligani, by far, were my favorite, my Marim in Yeshiva to learn. The yearly Basiligani.
The annual.
Yeah, no, the Hemshech also, but it's a different color, it's a different texture. I mean, Chalal there I would bring from different Rebbeim, but also topics that you never see anywhere
Right, actually,
else.
the last few years have been very involved because one of the projects we're working on, it's been delayed a bit, but it's going to come out for this year, Shvat, Bez Hashem, is the Lessons of Amarim series. So we have the lessons in Basi Lagani, which is, it's Tafshin Yud, and the Biur incorporates all the Rebbe's Biurim from all the years.
Wow. That's
So initially, it's just like, okay, so you have like Tanya, and you have a beer on it. It's not, because
No.
first of all, there's what the Rebbe translates, then there's added explanation, then there's where the Rebbe flips the mimer on its head.
Yeah, it's a reframing.
And there's the first
It's
cycle, the second cycle, which is also two different styles.
It's a reframing.
But at the end of the day, the Rebbe definitely saw in Basi Lagani everything.
Yeah.
Everything that we know from the Rebbe's Nesias and the Rebbe's message is all there. It's all there. The Rebbe saw it all there.
Yeah.
But without learning 40 years of the Rebbe's Basi Lagani, there's no way. There's no way you're gonna even dream of this stuff.
No, and I also agree with you, going back to your point about Basiligani, I also agree with you that there's certainly, in the Rebbe's Mamar and Basiligani, there's a lot of that tension between, how could you talk about this idea of Dir B'Tachtenim and Hamshachas Shchina Lamata in a way that's relevant to the individual. And you see a lot of that tension in different years. The Rebbe reformulates, and it goes back and forth. I think I don't have a memory to know where.
One of the back and forth is also Iskafi and Ishapcha. Which one reigns supreme?
No, but there's a more direct
Who's
one.
the
A more direct one to your point. Yeah, Iskafi and Ishapcha goes back and forth. Actually, he said, "I chazed the mimer." Was it Nun Beis? I think the last bus of the Yani.
The Mugadik one, Lamed Beis.
Yes, it's about his.
Right, Lamed Alf and Lamed Beis are both very strong.
Iskafi, maybe the Ishapcha. Chazed by Melachayim, I think.
Maybe the Ishapcha.
Chazed by Melachayim. Maybe the last time I ever chazed. Anyway, I've learned since then.
Wow. Saying Bar Mitzvah Maimer, Chasana Maimer.
No, I did a few in between, quite a few in between, but I haven't had opportunity since then. But anyway.
I could talk to a Gaboim in 70 if you want. We could Shabbos afternoon.
I don't live here, and I'm not yet at my midlife crisis. That's when you start doing it again. But no, it was a Anyway, it's a special idea to Chazer Maimer, but there's a more direct kind of back and forth that goes to your point, where v'asu l'mikdash chanti b'seicham, and then in the original Basiligani, Tzadikim Mishar Sishkon Aladaleh, and the Rebbe goes back and forth between the years of, is the Mishkan something that comes through Moshe and then everybody does it?
Yes.
Or is it something that
this year? I think there was a diok in the Maimer this year.
Right,
that was a bit different than other years.
Right.
Yeah.
It reformulates a lot of times.
Yes.
Is a Mishkan that you build a Mishkan that is built on the shoulders or as a continuation of the Rebbe's Mishkan, or is it your own Mishkan? So I think it's only fair to accept your basic idea that yes, there is a tension that's introduced immediately when you take a mimer like Basiligani, and you take it from being about showing up to davening and shiurim, which are important things, but are things that people are shaykh to in a very obvious way, and you start talking about himmel shazachin, right, and like historic ideas. Yeah.
I'm going to call it Himmel Zachen. It's Himmel Zachen is nice and ruchni. I'm saying, you mean the magnitude?
Shemayim ba'aretz, Yeshchina ba'aretz,
bird's eye view,
taking the heavens into the earth, and right, and like when you go to daven and you go to learn, you know that what you set out to accomplish, you accomplished. I went to Minyan and I had a kviyas to Torah. Right, what I wanted to do, I accomplished. When you talk about am I bringing Mashiach, let's say, or am I being Mamshe Shechina Lamata? Now you're talking about things that I can't see and I can't know. It's on belief, right? It's on faith that I'm doing it, and believing that 1 + 1 = 2. But I don't see it with my eyes, because we're talking about something that's above my pay grade, right? So I think for sure there's like that's for sure something that gets introduced with Basiligani. I think just to put a little bit more meat on the bone, I remember I read once, somebody gave me the Kuntres of Kol Dei Didafik by Rabbi Soloveitchik.
Okay.
Do you know about this? So Rabbi Soloveitchik, I think this was right after the 6-Day War. I think it was after. I think it was after. It was certainly after one of the wars. I think it was after the 6-Day War. And Rabbi Soloveitchik Kedarke, said, because this was it's a written down of something that he spoke, but a beautiful poetic idea of kol defik, the different knocks of the Eibishter, and the mixture of nigla and medrash and all the way he can do it, and philosophy and all the words and everything. Beautiful idea of how the Eibishter right now is knocking on our door. It's klar, the Eibishter is knocking on our door, telling us. And then what's the bakasha at the end? Okay. The bakasha in the end is that you guys are spending all your money on retirement homes in Miami and vacation in Miami. You should give $180 or something to Eretz Yisrael. Mashu kazeh.
So at the end of the day, it was a sales pitch. It was a
fundraising. I don't mean it that way. I think.
Right, but what's the tangible, practical application of it?
He was someone who understood his audience, and he understood he's not getting them now to get aroused in Avavira and to upend their lives and even make Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. No, you see how much God has shown His love to Bnei Yisrael and to Eretz Yisrael. Give a little bit. I know what I can ask of you. I'm going to ask you of that. Right. And in many ways, that's the normal thing to do. That's a reasonable thing to do. You ask people something that right? If somebody comes to you and asks if somebody comes and asks you for a donation of, you're a regular person, it's an important cause, can you give $180? I'll consider it. Can you give $1 million? You're nuts. Get lost, right? I can't even begin thinking about that, so I don't think about it at all. Right. And here, it's like, I'm going to ask you, so there's no question that is there. My only question would be, I don't know if it's a disagreement or where I would push back, where I would see differently, is that like you're in many ways you're saying that Basi Ligani, even in hindsight, has to be seen that basically the whole Lubavitch, this whole idea of the Rebbe taking responsibility, there's a shift from before and there's this new tkufa. I look at Basi Ligani and I don't see that. I mean, I just learned it, and it could be I'm looking at it through my own lenses. But I look at
look.
I don't know if it's native to the text. The Ein Adar v'Tolei Labanu. There was talking about Kol Chayv Lemer Masai Giyamaisai. Who's he talking about? Himself? He's talking about the people around him.
Right. Look, but it's important. I'm not just saying Basi Ligani without context.
Right.
Open any sikh of Tafshin Yud, Tafshin Yud Aleph, the Igris of those years, followed by shlichus, which is about a few years later in the late Yuds. Who were the people in the front that were troubled by shlichus and were sort of getting in the way, as the Rebbe put it, of the Rebbe sending out shluchim?
Right.
The Chassidim, the older Chassidim, right?
Right.
They weren't bad people. Right, so there's also narrative. Growing up, you had the people fighting the Rebbe and all.
Yeah,
it's right. There was no question a major shift happened. These people went through a lot. But what the Rebbe was asking for taking young light and young women with nothing. Like, what do they have? And sending them in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And they themselves should be strong in their Yiddishkeit. They should bring Yiddishkeit and be to the people and be mechanech their kids that way, without parnasa, without anything. It wasn't part of the script. And mind you, this didn't come like Behemshech to the Tzemach Tzedek. It was the Friedrich Rebbe. We did Mesiras Nefesh already for a doyer in Russia. And we were opening underground chadarim.
Right.
But it wasn't in this context of just entering the secular world on your own.
Right.
And so I don't need a Basi Ligani, I don't need a Maimon, I don't need a Sicha. The reality is that a major shift happened. And the Rebbe using Lashonis at times that were even, right, the Rebbe would challenge even the Nefesh Alikis. Right? That's also a bit of Nefesh Alikis.
Right.
Or Mela, you want to daven and you want to learn. That's your taivas.
Right.
It's like, where's that language from? Like, this is the issue of people.
Right.
You're talking to American kids. Their issue is they have a taiva to daven and learn and lose themselves in ayin beis.
Yeah.
So there wasn't ayin beis around those days yet, but like, really, that's the issue? Yeah. What has to be negeya is the Ratzin Hashem. Going back to Basi Ligani, in Basi Ligani, the Rebbe brings the Tuei Fan Mesiras Nefesh, right? So the Rebbe doesn't really connect it, but
You say just explain. You're talking about the Mesiras Nefesh of Rabbi
of Rebbe
Akiva,
Akiva, and
that he seeks it out, and
they
Avraham
seeks
Avinu.
they seeks it out, and then Avraham Avinu doesn't look for Mesiras Nefesh. Whatever has to be done is done.
Right.
So the Rebbe brings it from the Maimer, when the first Maimer Friedrich Rebbe said when he came to America, the Boil America, with Mashpia,
Right.
which is itself a very interesting thing. You see in multiple Maimarim, including in Mugadik and Maimarim, you see this in Malukit. The Rebbe doesn't just bring dates and talk about dates of a Maimer, but the Rebbe had a chavivus for Maimarim of Tafshin, the Maimarim that were said, the first Maimarim that were said in America, and the Rebbe was Mesiachas to them as the Maimarim Shenemru b'Boil Artzis Abriz b'Pamashnia or Almanas Loder in order to live here.
Right.
Like these were the Maimarim. These are American Maimarim. It's the American Chassidus.
Interesting.
And a lot of great ideas that the Rebbe speaks about, and some of them are so intuitive to us as Dor Hashvii Chassidim, the Rebbe was miyasid on those Maimarim. And for bringing the Rebbe once, there was a few times spoke about it, that in those Maimarim is like the Pasach Hatziner. It's the Pasach Reb Shimon of Chassidus in America. So one of the big points is the difference between Rebbe Akiva and Avraham Avinu. When you think about it, in a way, Dor Hashvii was the Mesiras Nefesh of Rebbe Akiva. Right? You had L'shonis from the Friedrich Rebbe, Yidin Chap Barayin Mesiras Nefesh. Because one day, you look back and say, where did I get more of this? I wish I had Mesiras Nefesh. Like, so you're asking, so he's actually asking us to want Mesiras Nefesh.
Right.
uns, this like came the language, wie viel Jahre hast du gesessen, right? It was like, you learn 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, already Mechzik Kiyora. That's already cultural. But the point is, there was that element, there was the culture of Chat Mesiras Nefesh.
Right.
And then the Rebbe came, and of course, the Rebbe says, it's right there in the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer and Tough Shin, but this is a massive shift. You're not looking, not for Tavis Nefesh Bahamis, not even for Nefesh Lakis, not even for Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh is already bittul. Aber Zuch Mesiras Nefesh is weiter Metzias. Rather, it's all about what the Eibishter wants from you.
Right.
Who does Avodas Hashem that way? The Rambam says, "Oy says the Pnei Shoemes is the Avodah of Avraham Avinu." That's exactly what he says. This is a very high level. Who's shaykh to the level of Oy says Pnei Shoemes? And the Rebbe came there and said, "Yeah, I'm talking to Chassidim, which maybe in many areas nismatu hamoichin valavavis, and you guys are way lower in many areas in your avodah and in your as individuals in your personalities and your spiritual growth." But who cares? Or maybe even dafke der far, right? Whichever way you look at it. But you're going to go out there and you're going to do unbelievable things from the most altruistic place. Now that's it's not normal. You can't ask people on their terms to do that.
Right.
So what's the solution to that? Right? This is one perspective. So the solution to that is what's going to happen now is like this. The Rebbe is steering the ship. The Rebbe is driving the train. You're right. You're not going to figure this all out. It's not all going to make sense to you. I can't really expect all of you that all day what's in your head is Lahavi the Mesa Mashiach and world change and all that. What you will do is this unhalten, the klamke, and I'm going to give you, here's a mitzvah tefillin, mitzvah mezuzah, mitzvah taras mishpacha, mitzvah matzah, mitzvah chanukah. There are different things that throughout the years of the Nesius, we're, in a way, it's similar to what you brought from Rabbi Soloveitchik. It's like, defined. You're going to be doing defined things, certain mitzvahim, pa'ulis.
Right.
And this was also part of the shift from previous doyers where it was more about moichin and lev, and here all of a sudden was ma'aseh v'ikr.
Right.
But it goes together because the greatest ideas, the way you'll access them is through these small ma'asim. Put on a tremendous amount of tefillin, open up Chabad houses, give shiurim, just do a bunch of things, and all of this together creates this massive flame, which will lead to Eresh Mashiach.
And yet,
by following orders, and you'll do this by following orders. You'll do what you're told to do, even if you don't fully understand, which is Chabad, but you'll follow orders, and together we'll bring about this amazing thing.
Yeah. So first of all, I wasn't looking to catch on Basiligani. It was an example. It was a matter of example. If you're completely right. That's not just Basiligani, and it's a trend line that you see in general. And I think fundamentally, I accept what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying, that ultimately, the Rebbe was demanding the impossible, and when you demand the impossible, there is fallout. It's not all of it, you see, and this is where people start getting nervous, But when you demand the impossible, you said before, it creates great beauty, but it could also create it could create the opposite of beauty, right? In the sense that when people are striving for the impossible, the successes are bigger, but the mistakes can also be bigger, right? That's you are heightening the stakes. You're asking more of people. You're asking the impossible of people. Now, what does that mean when people can't live up to that, right? It's a bigger failure in a way.
Right. I think there's a few points. There's number one, there's very high expectations could lead to a lot of feelings of incompetence and
it's the first line of Tanya. Right?
Very good, very good. That's number one. Number two is asking people to live on that level and to a certain degree not be in touch with their individual selves is also creates a certain dissonance and a certain dissociation from self, right?
Right.
And I agree. I think, that at the end of the day, everything has a price, if you may, but also to a certain degree, part of the message was, let's even take it from a very basic place. It's like after the Holocaust, when the Rebbe would ask, people get married and have kids, and there's the whole thing with Elie Wiesel. You just have to get married and have kids, even if you don't like it, you're unhappy. Part of it was, we have this massive mission that has to be done. Or think about right now what's going on in Eretz Yisrael. There's a massive war. And hundreds of thousands of people going to Miluim in Eretz Yisrael and flying in from elsewhere, leaving their homes for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. That's not crazy. There's going to be if we'll still be in Gullus, there's going to be a seriously traumatized generation, and not just from October 7th, from their fathers being out for months and coming back bruised and we hear 3 soldiers died and another 20 are injured in different ways. Some of these injuries are disastrous, right? And therefore what? So we don't have to fight for our survival, right? When there's a mission, there's a mission.
Oh, no, I'm not even. Yeah.
Right.
No.
So part of it, yeah. Everything in this world has a price. Even the,
100%.
Even the most holy endeavors, everything will come with a certain price. And part of it was, you call it a calculation, you call it the mission of the Dor. This is the mission of the Dor. This is what has to be done. And yeah, and at times there were, and you see this in Igris, where people told the Rebbe they put on 40 people to film. The Rebbe was like, why 40? Or went at 400 or something like that.
Right.
And then the person writes to the Rebbe that he's feeling all down and all dejected by the response. And the Rebbe responds and says, Chas v'shalom, the point of the response wasn't you should feel dejected. It was more to give you a boost. Now, but it didn't just happen once. You see many times in Igris and the reminders of the Rebbe, you see that people took the response in that way.
Right.
And the Rebbe continued responding that way. And obviously, the Rebbe is not here to mitzayer any yid in any which way, and it came from Ava. But the message doesn't change. That's the Rebbe's message to the world. And at times it's hard for us to handle. And I know, and I think part of what's going the last few years, we might have left that message a bit due to fear and due to also who's in that position to be able to speak to people that way. Right? When the Rebbe speaks that way, it's the Rebbe speaking that way. But that is the Rebbe's message, and at times it's hard to swallow. The Rebbe's messages aren't always lovey-dovey, and they're not always cute and inspiring and self-helpish. They're very.
No, they're never.
They're a pressure cooker.
They're never. You said they're not always. They're never that.
No, there are geschmacke. There's a geschmacke in Yonim. There's a sichos you could learn. Gives you a.
When you let it.
So that's also what you call the feminized version of the.
When you let it rip, right? When you let it rip, and you take it for what the Rebbe is saying, it's never. You're never getting away with an $18 check or $180 check to some foundation in Israel. That never, ever happens.
Right? In the earlier years when the Rebbe would do at times fundraisers, appeals during Fabrengen, and the guy picks up his hand, he's giving 5 times chai, tzemol azoifil. What does tzemol azoifil mean? It's almost what was money in those days. Right. The guy's giving $180. Tzemol azoifil. What tzemol azoifil $180 is? Right. Even today, someone tell you in shul, someone tell 10 times as much. I don't have that money.
Right.
And it was always more. So it was 2 things. Number one, if you're there or not, as du fühlst dir und du fühlst nicht, verstehst dir, verstehst nicht, the mission has to be done. That was number one. But another point is, the Rebbe Taka sees in every single person unbelievable and unlimited potential. And the Rebbe saw us way bigger than we are. But not always did we see ourselves that way. Over Mela, when you live up to that expectation, but you don't buy into that sense of self, that can also create a certain friction and a certain.
Look, you said before that the fact that sometimes what the Rebbe says is not going to make you feel good about yourself, but that shouldn't be a reason not to say what is true. Meaning, I agree with that 100%. The argument for me, at least, is never that because the Rebbe's demands were at the line of impossible, if not beyond that. The Rebbe was asking of people something that fundamentally was out of their grasp. Acknowledging that is not to say, oh, you see, it's impossible, leave it alone. It's, or because people are not up to it, because it makes people feel small, leave it alone. I don't think you have to go in either of those directions. I don't think you have to discard it or to sugarcoat it. You have to at the very beginning acknowledge what it is. See, a lot of times when you come to kind of understanding a phenomenon, understanding a problem, right? You're already thinking a step ahead, and you're saying, well, if I interpret it this way, what is it going to mean for me? Or what is it going to mean for that person? And because I know that if I go down that road, I'm going to end up there. I don't want to end up there, so therefore I'm not going to go down that road, and I'm going to contort myself and go somewhere else.
Okay.
Right? No. If this is the road that we understand, if this is what makes sense, that the Rebbe was demanding the impossible, then go down that road and see where it leads us. Okay? Don't try to retrace your steps and maybe we can. He didn't really mean it that way. He meant it somewhere else, or no. This is what. Okay, so now we acknowledge that the Rebbe was asking the impossible. What does that mean? What does that mean? What are the ramifications of that? And so if it makes people feel small, I don't think that means we go back and say that wasn't true in the first place. I think we try to understand, how are we supposed to live with those two things true at the same time, right? There's no point in having people feel small in an unhealthy way. Small in a healthy way, of course, humility is great, but small in a dispiriting, disempowering way is the opposite of Chassidus, the opposite of Yiddishkeit. So that's obviously not what the Rebbe wanted. Right. And he also didn't speak that way. So he obviously didn't want people to feel demoralized and just like pathetic, right? But how can you feel not small, right? You want to make an impact on the world, and at the same time understand that there is not working within your kind of expectations or understanding of yourself, but talking about something much larger than you. How does that work, right? I think step one is to understand what's at play here instead of trying to, push one way or another. Oh, it's making people feel small. We have to revisit it. Oh, it's too, it's or people, let's push it harder, or let's just insist that no, if the Rebbe said it that way, that's all that there is to it. And the fact that people feel small, who cares about them? These are the words of Moshe Rabbeinu and
right.
Gefeifen. I think either way, you're worried about where you're going to end up in this process of understanding, and so you're discarding what's in front of your eyes, right? The Rebbe wanted people. The Rebbe spoke about the massive responsibility that each individual has, and the Rebbe also at the same time spoke about people not becoming demoralized. Those are two truths. Okay, go deal with it.
Right.
My point was never to say that because people might feel dispirited, therefore it's that can't be what the Rebbe ever said. No, if I cared, I think that's exactly the point. That is what the Rebbe said. That is what the Rebbe said. That is the guiding of what the Rebbe spoke about. And I think in many ways that is where the conversation has to begin. Because you talked about the shock of Gimel Tammuz, or the shock of Chav Zayin Adar. And in the course of this conversation, what I'm picking up on is the shock of Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph.
Right.
All of that, right? All of that traces back to then.
Because how can Yud Shvat exist in the vacuum of Gimel Tammuz? Or what it does is that it. Oh, so
Fakir.
Yeah, I get it.
Fakir. Gimel Tammuz. The reason people were at a place where they were.
Yeah, the shock of Gimel Tammuz. I wasn't around Yud Shvat, even Gimel Tammuz I was a kid, but I would assume the shock of Gimel Tammuz, in a certain degree, was a greater shock than Yud Shvat and Beis Nissen.
No, you're misunderstanding me. Not Tafshin Yud, Tafshin Yud Aleph.
Right, but what I'm saying is because of Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph, so the Gimel Tammuz creates a bigger shock than other such days.
Right.
Right. Not only because then there was a mamshich.
Right.
But also because what Rebbe meant to us was in a way much deeper and much more intense than it meant in previous doiras.
Right, exactly. When as you're explaining it, that in Tafshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe set up a situation where the Chassidim are expected to be involved in something that, generally speaking, was left
It's
to
Rebbish.
the Rebbe and to the Tzaddikim, and maybe some select Chassidim.
Right.
But now everyone's being brought into it. That was the shock, and that remains the shock.
Yes.
Now, what's the point of pointing out which shock it is? Because I think that is a shock that is worth living with. That's not a shock that demoralizes you, or a shock that confuses you, or, like you said earlier, disorients you. That's a very positive shock, right? The way, in general, I don't know if you agree with this, but the way, what time is it? Oh, I have to get going soon. The way I understand, like this whole story this whole picture that we're painting here, is not that I was talking to the void and just talking to people that weren't shaykh to it. In many ways, the way I see it is, and maybe it's just it's very, very homespun but the Rebbe knew that one way or another there wasn't going to be another Rebbe after him. I mean, everybody knew that, but clearly he knew that too, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to say what needs to be said, and one day, or at some point, either today or tomorrow, and probably not, but probably in 40, 50, 60, 70 years from now, those words will begin to be understood, right? At some point, it is also very clear in Basiligani. At some point, it becomes at some point, the rubber meets the road. There's no more pushing. What's the word? Kicking the can down the road. There's nobody else that's going to. If I kind of take it from point A to point B, they'll take it from point B to point C. No. I'm going to talk about how we get to the end zone, how we get to the finish line. When it happens, nobody can. That's Eibishter's business, right? But we're going to talk in language that is total, all the way to the end. Now, the people that are listening to this language this is much bigger than them, right? But they'll catch up at some point. Whether or not, I don't know if you agree with that analysis, but why am I even bringing it up? Because at least to me, that's one way of interpreting the shock of Yud Shvat, right? How do I make sense of this Dor Hashvii idea? And how do I make sense of the contradictions of it? I understand that there's something very big at play here, and I have to catch up to it. I have to make sense of it. But that's the point. The point is I have to make sense of it. You see? As opposed to a very negative thing of like a betrayal and loss, and it's something when it's not the way it's supposed to be, and I have to figure out a way how to, you know what I'm saying?
Right. But I think all this, it sets up the clincher, which is the final point I was trying to bring to. So what was the message then? Right. So what's the message of Chav Ches Nissen or Purim Mem Zayin or all those Sichos? And I think what the Rebbe was saying then is like this. So for 40 years, the way we understood how to handle that leap, right? We're thrown into the special forces all of a sudden. Go there in Gaza and figure out what you have to do. the way it was done is, from being a regular citizen, all somewhere on the front lines is, right, surrender your will and your mind to the Rebbe. Right, where it's basically the Rebbe will tell you what to do, and you're the foot soldiers, and you're going to go out there and conquer the world. So the big picture, the CEO, the commander-in-chief, that's the Rebbe. And then there's a bunch of foot soldiers, Anshe Chayil, it speaks about many of the Basi Lagani, right? The people actually out there in the field, doing what you have to do, and you're able to do great things because you're Nanas Agabe Anak, literally. You're following orders. Now the Rebbe comes and says, now will be leap number 2. Right? The first leap was from just doing Chassid Avodah, you're now going to do Rebbe Shein by following what the Rebbe tells you. But now comes the next stage. The next stage is now you're going to enter my office. Right? Now it's not just I'm giving out orders. Now you have to buy into the mission itself, to the big picture. Not just live up, because until now the resolution, if you may, the way we can live on such a high level is by doing simple things.
Being part of the army.
Right. Now, all of a sudden, what are we doing? Now, G'doyim Nasu Tiyashim, to quote the Yechidus. Right now, all of a sudden, right, what the Rebbe would use a lot of language those years, especially with Tafshin Nun and on, Ko Yinish Adaite the Rebbe. Right, Boyim Shnein Ko Yinish Adaite. Ko Yinish Adaite the Rebbe is not knowing how many Miftsoyim there are, and how many Yidden you put on film. Of course, you do that. It's buying in. Right. 40 years, the Rebbe is giving us Rebbe vision. Right. And now you guys will do that. Right. Now this was already too much. You're telling me to suspend myself, right, and give myself over to something greater than myself. I could do that. But now you're telling me to be a different person. Right? Now you're saying that Chassids, Chushei HaTalmid or Chushei HaRav, now you're saying that we have to buy into the Rebbe's model and to the Rebbe's vision. And the biggest vision of all is Geula. Right? When they're talking about learning Yonah Geula Mashiach, it's not another mitzvah to read another sif or two and to get some orange juice.
It's to see why I'm excited about it. You should be excited to see why I'm excited.
For 10 years, they were screaming for Farbrengen Zad Masay, and every Farbrengen we're screaming at him. We want Mashiach now. Was a like Bleimer Farbrengen. We're for an hour and a half. They say we want Mashiach now, and the Rebbe is saying it's all you completely missed the point. Yeah. Right? Because what I was doing, it wasn't that the Rebbe wants Mashiach. Okay, so the Rebbe wants, right? But that was the reason we reacted that way, because we didn't have any other frame of reference. How could I care about Mashiach, which is something so massive? Right. The only way we could do that is the Rebbe wants Mashiach, so we're with you. Right. If the Rebbe would say tomorrow, we don't need Mashiach, I'm saying, if you ask me, who wants Mashiach, we're doing just fine here in some 70. Right? Mashiach is more people in the shul. I really need my bubbit to come back and breathe down my back. So.
Well, a lot of people have a misconception about the Tchias HaMesim. They think only the people they want come back. No, everybody comes back. And the majority are people that you don't want.
Yes. So, and that was what the Rebbe was saying is, no, what I really want with all those Hayrois and all those Sichos and all those Mamorim all along was, and in retrospect, this is the mission from Tafshin Yud Aleph, but perhaps we weren't able to handle it then. The way to handle it then was just by, being quiet, listening, and folging. But now we're saying, no, you all have to buy in and you all have to assume responsibility. Not responsibility because I told you to. Right? Because if you start screaming Ad Masai, it's like when you see the video, it's unbelievable. The Rebbe is speaking about, if you say Ad Masai, it's Mipnei Atzivui, and literally right after the Sicha, they all start saying Ad Masai. Right? So you would ask them, they would tell you, everyone that was there, it wasn't Mipnei Atzivui. We did it because we were all inspired now. But the Rebbe was saying, but that inspiration itself is an inspiration from the Sicha, right? You're just inspired by the frustration.
I don't think there was a way out, frankly.
Right. No, and you can't. That's what I'm saying, because you're coming from so many years and living in the Rebbe's shadow, and in the Rebbe's Daled Amos, in a positive sense. Like, that was it. You were living in the shadow of greatness, and you were becoming great. But the way you were becoming great was by just being in that shadow and not sticking out.
Right.
And now all of a sudden the Rebbe tells you, take ownership. Right, when the Rebbe starts speaking about shlichus, also the Rebbe starts speaking about shlichus differently. From shlichus just being 3 dargis and bittul to the Mishaleach, now the sprach started becoming bittul, that the shliach has a mitzvah. It's not only bittul, it's also he's not an eved.
Right.
He's a shliach. And all of a sudden, we're like, one second, but that's what we've not been doing for 40 years. We've been pushing that on the side. We're not the Dor Hashvii guys. We're not the guys who are sitting and working on themselves and building their personality and their ideas. It was about putting aside. It was batal ritzoyincha mipnei ritzoyinai. And now all of a sudden we're being told asay ritzoyincha ritzoyinai. And that was very, very tough, right? Because partly you could say it's about assuming responsibility. Our grandparents didn't assume responsibility. Our Zaydas didn't sit in prison for opening chadarim. Like, what's the big message? Right? And then it starts becoming like, for 40 years in Dor Hashvii, we're a bunch of kids that didn't assume responsibility. People open up big moistus, right?
It's a different kind of responsibility.
Oh, that's the vart.
Responsibility, I think you have to be matkish. Responsibility is responsibility is that I'm responsible to make a move, even if it's a wrong move and even if it's a mistake. That responsibility that didn't exist before, because before, if they ever told you to do something, you knew what you're doing was right.
Because we weren't in that position. We weren't in the boardroom, right? We were on this level.
No, but I'm saying responsibility. There are different kinds of responsibility. There's responsibility of I'm responsible for this organization. I'm responsible for building this building. I'm responsible for the mikveh in this underground town.
Yes.
Right. But then there's a responsibility of the decision I made in the first place. That's what's changed.
Let's say they're going out on shlichus.
Yeah, that's what's changed. What's changed is not I'm responsible for the thing that's been given to me. The responsibility is for the thing that I have taken for myself, right?
Right, you're saying there's going on shlichus because the Rebbe wants you to go on shlichus and the Rebbe is going to smile, which is one level. And then there's I'm going on shlichus because I buy into the vision.
Yeah, but open it up a little bit. Now that I'm on in those days, if someone had an idea on shlichus, they wrote in, and they were told yes or no.
Some years more than others, but yeah, but that was the model. That's the model, right?
No, and that changed with time.
Yes,
in the beginning it was
more and more,
right? And now, if someone has an idea, right? They don't get told yes or no. They can a lot of people don't get told yes or no. Right? No, but you certainly don't get told yes or no the way you used to get told yes or no, okay? In a way that everyone else agrees that you got told yes or no, right? Okay, so now the responsibility is not just to follow the order in the best possible way. The responsibility is to make a move where you don't know if it's a right thing, but you have to now trust that you're doing it for the right reason. And maybe you're making a mistake. Maybe it's not kafiyah kavanah.
It's always a price of responsibility.
Right. But that's the level of responsibility that you're talking about. Because that's different than running a big maisid. You could run a $10 million maisid, but making a $10 decision on your own is a different story. Right? The moral decision of the $10 could be a bigger moral responsibility than running a big maisid that you know for a fact.
Right, and that is something that I think I see, and probably you see it as well. And I think that today you see that more. You see people owning up to decisions, and you see people recognizing that some decisions are going to be painful, and there's going to be a price tag. And you can't always Rebbe it, meaning you can't just say the Rebbe told me, and right, you have to own up to decision making. Is it because people today are stronger and again, like I said, there's just time does its thing. Our boim shnin koyin shadayt the Rebbe is a real thing. The Rebbe then spoke about our boim shana and tafshanun, but there's our boim shana from that language, right? There's our boim shana from the Rebbe asking us to own it as well. Then there's obviously nothing could compare to standing in front of the Rav as he's telling you it. But then there's the truth of our boim shnin. It's just time. It's ideas sitting. It's reality, giving you messages.
Well, in many ways, it's bigger than sitting in front of the Rav. It depends how you're looking at it. If you're looking at it in terms of the experience is more powerful when you're in front of the Rav. But in that idea of Arba'im Shnin, right? When is it most meaningful? When is it most impactful? It's 40 years later. Right, when you're sitting in front of the Rav, you're batal b'tachlis. That's the whole point. You're not a thing. You're just open. It's pure reception. But in a way, but who needs that? The Rav already had the idea. It needs someone else to hear the idea. What's it going to gain? No. The point is that in 40 years, he has a Talmud. That idea now is secure. That idea now can be taught to the next person. Until that 40 years, that idea can never be taught again.
But remember, it's G'doyim Nasut Yashim. You don't have the G'doyim.
I understand.
Meaning without the 40 years of the complete dedication that happened then, there was no way that we could figure out what it is now, right? You're never going to have
Yeah.
Amazon started in a garage, right?
I'm not. Look. I don't think. I
Right.
don't think. I don't. I think what's nice about this conversation is you can look, and I often do look at like, okay, Lubavitch lost its mind for 40 years, maybe for good reasons, but they lost their mind. They went way too far in this kind of halten sich zum Klamke idea and like just lost their mind, lost their identity, everything, and they got a massive zets as a result, bigger than it needed to be. It was going to be big, but bigger than it needed to be by Gimel Tammuz, and now people are waking up to. That's a more I don't know if the word cynical, but a more kind of a more critical way of looking at it. Okay.
Right.
I think cynical is to say that Bechal didn't happen, and why are you even talking about this? That to me is cynical.
Right, people come and say it was always avoid the b'koyach atzma.
Or like was they to a cup.
You just heard something from somebody, but it's not really what was going on.
Right. No, cynical is more like, what are you even talking about? Why is it even a problem?
Okay.
Right. Like as if it's not relevant. No. It's a critical way of looking at it. But I think the way you're casting it, the way I'm understanding it is, no, this is in many ways inevitable. When the Rebbe is going to come, and one reason or another, we'll never know exactly what he was thinking. I proposed earlier a theory, but it's just a theory, right? The Rebbe came and said, look, from now on, the Lubavitch is going to talk in final terms. I'm going to talk not in incremental, how we get a little bit further. We're going to talk now, like, Goyal Tzedek language. How do we get to the finish line? However long it takes, but we're talking in final total terms now, right? That language created a shock. Whether maybe at that time people were elated, they were thrilled, but it created a shock to the system of now people had to live up to an expectation that they were not used to. They had to live up to a responsibility that they were not used to. They had to live up to a responsibility that was fundamentally above them. And for 40 years, like you explained, one of the ways they dealt with that was basically saying, okay, you know what, fine, we'll just take orders. You tell us where we're to be, we'll show up, right? That's how this is how this team is going to work. And the understanding was that this Mashiach has to come, because what happens when the general isn't here, right? But fundamentally, that was never the true foundation of the idea. The foundation of the idea was that each person has to be empowered to live up to a higher level, not just to follow orders, right? And so the shock happened at the beginning. It played out over the course of all the years that came after, right? So instead of looking at that era of people that lost their mind, so it's looking at it as an era of people who were in the first stage, the inevitable first stage of this transition, and it was going. Maybe it didn't have to happen exactly the way it happened. There were certainly embellishments in different directions. And people did do things that can be critiqued. But overall, there was an attempt to try to live up to this new standard. And it led people in that direction. And then there was a shock of Gimel Tammuz. But that was really a continuation of the foundational shock. So when we talk about, why is it important to me? Because when we talk about Gimel Tammuz, when we talk about Gimel Tammuz, when we talk about Lubavitch today, I think it's far more productive and far more healthy and far more useful to think about it as something that started in Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph as opposed to something that started in Gimel Tammuz Tafshin Yud Dalet, right? Whatever happened in Gimel Tammuz Tafshin Yud Dalet in many ways is a continuation of what happened in Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph. And of course, if you want to go further back, it goes back to the Alter Rebbe, right, and to the Baal Shem Tov, and then eventually to Matan Torah. And the point of that is that it gives you something constructive and useful to work with, as opposed 100%. To
right. And we're not just responding to a shock, and we always find a different defense mechanism.
Right.
Something. So let's go back to what we were speaking about all the way in the beginning. So I think part of the journey, I know for me and probably other people my age, and you might have it as well, just in different oisias, was that I think what we were being preached to the first 10 years, it was the Nuns and the Samachs, and it was, let's continue that old model.
Right.
And us as kids, okay, we take whatever we take. Then you start growing, and it's like, but how does that model work? The Rebbe isn't telling me a sicha today.
Right.
And I have a question, I can't just write and get a clear answer.
Right.
So it was all kinds of ways how to force clear answers, right? And how to, it was all trying different ways, and every party, let's say, tried another way of holding that together. And then, and pretty much just by living, right? And getting married and having kids. And as well, I think many of us just realize that the Rebbe wants something more from us. And what I see now is that this next door, Bachram, if we bring with and talk to, by them, these ideas are a lot more pashut. It's like we're talking like this transition that we went through and this journey. It's like by many Bachrams, like, you can't just know the heroes. You have to know how to think. You have to learn the Rebbe's Torah, and you have to build an identity. And it's like so pashut. And I got one asked me, like, what's the chiddush here? Like, obviously. And it's like, am I supposed to share? Am I supposed to share all that with you? You would say yes, because history is important. So, and that, amongst many other things, it makes me hopeful. It makes me hopeful that there's, in other words, we're talking about our Dor, what we're doing. The next Dor is they're on fire. I'm not, there's other things going on as well. But I'm saying, but as a whole, and I see this in Sem 70 Bacher, there's an appreciation to be not just the Rebbe's mensch, not just the Anshe Moshe, be the Rebbe's Talmidim, and be the Rebbe's, and be, the Rebbe's worldview, the Rebbe's cook.
I'm not cynical to that at all. Fakert, I think that if so long as we look at it as a Gimel Tammuz prism, where so therefore every younger generation is a generation further away from that truth, and a generation further demoralized and further dispirited by Gimel Tammuz, then like you're telling me they're better than them, I cut it out. Right. And that kind of talk, like I wish,
And then it goes to be cool, but they're better because of oil, and they're better because of etzem, and then it's like, does anyone even hear what they're saying?
I got no patience for this kind of psychobabble, but I don't have patience. If it works for you, God bless you. It doesn't work for me. But when you talk about it, when you think about it as, we're talking about something that's very that's mevusus on emes. It's something that comes from okay, but that's very general. But there was an explosion of an idea that took place in Tafshin Yud, which of course can be traced back to earlier. But let's focus on Tafshin Yud. That explosion of an idea can last who knows how long, right? And the more it's internalized and the more it's developed, the bigger it can get, not the smaller it can get. That's why I think it's so important to see it as a shock of life, as opposed to a shock of the opposite of life. Ultimately, that's what the idea of istalkos, according to Chassidus, is also that by a tzaddik, the petir of a tzaddik is not the opposite of life. It's an explosion of life, but in a different level.
Called Ma'asav Tirasi Avidasai,
and it goes up higher and higher and higher and higher in a different way, right? And that is the ultimate explosion. It explodes in a way that lives on further and further and bigger, and so Here,
1 second.
Anyway, I have to get going
anyway,
and I'm sure you have to get going. This has been a pleasure. We went way over.
Bentzi was good. It took a bit too many years to sit down and bring.
Yeah.
Next time we'll be with the Bissel Chaim.
The water worked for me. All right. Seder, Yashikach. Thank you. The music for this podcast comes from the album Repentant Stores by Oren Tzor and Nadav Bachar and is used with their permission.